great story, and I don't know if it's true, that if you've studied anything about design, good design, whether we're talking about industrial design or city planning or architecture or landscaping, it's a great story about this university campus that it was building a new quad and a whole new area of the campus, and they're trying to decide where to put the sidewalks. And there's a whole bunch of people weighing in and saying, we should put the sidewalks around the edges of the quad and then do a diagonal through the middle so that you could quickly get to any building at any time. And other people said, no, we want to leave the quad nice and beautiful and green, and we'll just make people walk around the edges and we'll put sidewalks here and there. And then finally one guy said, why don't we just not build sidewalks this year? And we'll watch where everybody naturally walks. And then at the end of a year or so, we'll look at where the paths have been naturally, where the grass has been worn down, and we'll put the sidewalks there. And we'll just pave wherever those places are. And that is just sort of a brilliant insight. And I would do well to remind myself of that story more often, I think, because in designing this database, I'm trying to figure out all the time. I'm thinking, what are they going to need? What if this happens, and what if that happens, and what if they decide to click this button in the wrong time, and or do they have a way to do this? Do they have an easy way to do this? Are they going to get confused? And your head starts to really fill up with a whole bunch of craziness, and you end up over designing things, and you end up, if you're not careful, making a bad design. I'm telling you this because there is, and after all of this stuff that I've shown you with the t-shirts and the gifts and the party invitations, there's one possibility that I just have not been able to account for, and I have several sort of solutions in mind. But I don't want to over-design this, and I don't want to just pick at every little minutia that comes up. But this is going to be an issue, so you should be aware of it. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to leave it this year and make you aware that the issue exists and see what you guys come up with as a solution. And you may have to do this on a piece of paper off to the side because the database is not set up to handle this particular scenario. And, next year we'll take a look at, what your solution was, and maybe we'll implement that. Because I just, I don't want to over-design this. But there does need to be some solution for it. And this all comes back to, it's sort of a throwback to the old MAC address book that the executive assistants have been sort of using up until now as their sort of contact list. And I think by now, as you're using the database and watching these tutorials, you've realized that this database is much more than just a contact list like the MAC address book. There's a lot more things that are being tracked in many different ways to do things. It's not your personal notebook, right? You can't just throw in just your notes off the top of your head and pick any field you want and write stuff down because you're the only person that's using that MAC address book on your own personal computer, and you're the only one that ever has to go back and access that information. And so as long as you know what you meant, then you're kind of fine. But we understand now that this database is being shared by the entire company over many years, and people's positions change. People come in and out of the company and take on different responsibilities, but this data has to be understandable to whoever's using it. So there's a lot more responsibility, just like with Spider-Man. There's more power, but there's more responsibility, because every time you put a single bit of data into this database, that is available to everyone else. And so you have to kind of think about what you're doing beforehand. And so here is kind of what I'm getting at, okay? In the old MAC address book, we did this sometimes. We would come in here, and I'm just going to do a search for an ampersand in the contacts area and run that fine. Now I found 15 people, and look what we get here. Ludo and Chrissy Lefevre, Dave and Jen Denisko, Doug and Shannon Drenick, Beth and Al. You see what's going on here? These are two people that are sharing one contact record. Well, the database is not set up for that. Ideally, you would separate these two people out and give them each their own contact, and then if we need to tie people back together as husband and wife or a couple or part of the same family, and that's important enough to keep them, in the database that way, then I could design a part of the system that does that and gives you a way to say Beth Duffy is married to Al Duffy, and they're a couple. And so when you send out invitations, it should be addressed to Beth and Al Duffy or Mr. and Mrs. Al Duffy, right? As opposed to each of them getting a single invitation. You do want to send them that invitation together, right? But the database can't really do that. And furthermore, and so what happens? How do you account for them? They're one record, and say I add in over here for Beth and Al, and we're going to invite them to the party. Well, do I invite them as yes? Well, that's only going to count for one person, right? So you say, all right, well, let's just make it a yes plus one, because I know that that's going to mean two people, and then that'll be proper. Except now they're going to get an invitation that says Beth and Al Duffy and guest, right? And so they may think, hey, there's two people coming and I'm allowed to bring a third. So we're expecting two and they bring three. So that's a situation that is not really able to be accounted for. And then what happens if you want to order a t-shirt for these guys? Well, what if you want to send both of them a t-shirt? You say, oh, well, I'm going to put a yes here, and then I'll just do another one here, and I'll just do another t-shirt. Oh, but wait a minute. There's only one t-shirt and jacket size associated with this contact record. I pretty much can guarantee you that Beth and Al don't wear the exact same size t-shirt. So that's another area where you guys are going to have to come up with some system off to the side to account for this scenario. And as I do a search for ampersand, there's 15 out of 1,446, right? So it's not going to be a huge issue, but I wanted you to be aware of it. And I haven't done this yet, but I suspect that if I do a search for a wildcard search here for the word and, star and, well, I get and, I'm going to get ands, but let's see if yep, there's one. So there's a few more in here that's spelled out and, right? So you need to, take that into account. And I did also want to just mention to you in this little piece, and then we'll go into the final fire drill. I'm going to do that fine for the ampersand again. There's one that came up really weird, and it may not be a mistake, it may be intentional, but it doesn't make sense to me. And as long as I've got you here listening to this, I want to point this out. When we look over into the work history for these people, Ludo and Chrissy, I've got them attached to a company called Ludo Lefevre, which is this guy. Now, nobody else is like that, but that means that over in the company's side of things, there's a company called Ludo Lefevre. Maybe there is. Maybe this is the name of Ludo's company. Does Ludo and Chrissy both work at Ludo Lefevre? And if so, is that why you've attached an employment history to both of them together? This is why it's fine in a personal contact MAC address book, whatever, to just sort of put people in together, because again, it's just your personal notes essentially. But this stuff has to be used by everybody at Authentic Entertainment over the course of many, many years. You can't be that casual with stuff anymore. And I don't have a perfect solution for this yet. I mean, I have several different options for how I could solve this problem, but I'm not going to do it yet because I want to wait and see what you guys come up with, because you may have a solution that's better than anything that I've thought of. And since it's only a small number of people, I thought I'd throw that to you as maybe a little bit of homework and see what you guys come up with, and tell me at the end of the holiday season how you managed to track these people and their numbers and their t-shirts and their invites and keep those number totals accurate. And don't forget that you have these notes areas and these tags to take advantage of as well. So just as an example here, you could put something in here like this in the tags that says greater than one person in the record. Now, and you mark that off, and at least you have a way of kind of tracking temporarily the files, the records that are like this. It may, it's not going to fix the whole totaling problem, but at least rather than writing it off into another file somewhere, at least you have a way within the database to track that information. And you've got your notes fields here, and don't forget about those. So you have your public notes, and anything that you type into this notes field is shared throughout the entire database, so anyone that comes to this record and clicks here would see what you typed, and everyone contributes to this notes field together. And then you have your private notes where it says My Notes, and this is exclusive to your account, so only you can see what you write into this account, and other people can have their own as well. So you can take private notes here. You can put timestamps for every note as you start them, so you have a little time and date. That's just a little convenience. So those things are there as well. And just again, the one thing, when you're coming up with an idea for a solution for this, that I don't want you guys to do, and I think that at some point when this database is sort of rolled out on a larger scale for the whole company, Authentic already has in its initial employee training a little packet about learning to use the old database, and I think that's a good idea. But one thing that we may want to implement in the future for everyone is just I think that it would do everyone well just to sort of get that little mini lecture that I just sort of gave about the fact that this is not your personal notebook. Let everybody just sort of understand that whatever change you make will affect the work of everyone else at the company in one way or another, and so you must really take your time to understand what it is you're doing, and don't just use a field because it's a convenient, quick place to type something, and say, well, I'll know what this means, and you just type something into this empty field because it's there and it's easy and it's fast. That may help you. It's going to screw everybody else up. And so when if you were to come over here and do this thing with these people and add this, and that's why I say it's like, oh, well, there's no real way to do this in the database, so I'm just going to say, okay, well, I'm just going to say jacket here, yes, and that'll mean, I'll know that means that I really mean I need to order two t-shirts here. Well, that may be fine for you, you know what that means, but it's going to throw off all the totals everywhere else. If there is not an obvious way to do what you need to do to get your job done, ask the database manager, ask me, ask IT. If you don't see it, it's possible, very possible, that it's a failure on my part, that I didn't design that well, that it's not the way you need it. And I am all too happy to figure out a way to fix that and give you the tools that you need to do your job efficiently. But in the meantime, don't just make up a system on your own. It will just destroy everything that this tool could be used for. And you only have to look at the old database and just sort of walk through the records sometime, and you can see the result of many years of people just sort of casually using it as their own personal address book and not taking care to really understand what it is they were doing. And it got to the point where at a certain point the thing was just so incomprehensible that it became unusable. There are sections of it that are still usable, but if you go to look for somebody in there, there's one person in there 6 different times because people have just typed it in themselves and didn't bother to do a find first to see if they were already there, etc., etc. I'm sorry to be like lecturing about this, but I do think, and I'm not just don't get me wrong, I'm not just focusing on the executive assistants. I know this is the holiday section, and this topic came up. But again, this is something that I think really should go into the database training for the entire company, and there just needs to be a slight cultural shift in terms of the reverence that is paid to this system, in terms of understanding that this is not just your MAC address book anymore. You're sharing this with everyone, and the data, in order for it to be useful to anyone, must be entered with care. Okay, enough of my little soapbox. So this. Let me delete this before and see. You have to remember that, because I'll go in there and forget to delete things, and then I've screwed up the data. So got to take care. But in any event, here's a good place to do that. If you don't like this system or this little greater than one person in record, or you come up with other tags that you'd like to add to this tags area, the executive assistants don't have access to make changes to this area, but IT does. The IT manager and the database manager does. So if you come up with something you want to put here, just give Chris Wilson a shout, and he can come over there and add it for you, or of course always send me an email and I will do the same. Okay, so just wanted to throw that little Zen sidewalk story at you, and I'm going to not pave any sidewalks this holiday season. I'm just going to see where the grass gets worn down, and next year I'll put in the sidewalks. Alright guys, coming back, we're going to do the fire drill.